Welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors, episode 105.
Welcome to Life by Design, the podcast for chiropractors. Here's your host, Dr. Jamie Richards.
Hey guys, welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors. It's Jamie, and as you can tell, I'm flying solo today. Something we're doing a bit more of. We do these more curated podcasts where myself, Crecio, and Mike get on, and obviously we have a topic that we're going to dig into and uncover, and there's a lot of content around that. And then in between, we've got these episodes where it's simply me getting on and just sharing my thoughts about something that has come up either in coaching calls, something that's come up in some other form of content that I felt like would be valuable to go into a bit deeper. So today I'm talking about this idea of the headline probably said something in terms of speak up or, being too soft. And it came up a couple times recently in some conversations just about, the question is, how much should I be communicating concern to my patient? What conversations am I willing to have? Am I not willing to have? And so let me go back a little bit, and I can, again, share with you my own personal experience, having come from a time where we actually went to seminars and actually went and did live events where we'd listen to speakers. And I'm sure I'm dating myself here in the chiropractic profession to some degree, but one of the things that we would hear a lot about, and I completely disagree with, was, intentionally driving somebody to tears or intentionally, creating an emotional response that, simulated what would be like if somebody was told they had cancer or some other, life-ending serious illness. And, I think when I heard that, it really pushed me so far away from that type of communication. It just felt wrong. It was uncomfortable. And not to say that anything uncomfortable is necessarily wrong. And I think that's an important distinction. It just so happens that I believe it is wrong. So the problem was it sent me down a path in the complete opposite direction where, I got immersed into, really a model of chiropractic and potential and chiropractic and what it could do for you. And I think that's great. And I'm glad I went down that path, and it taught me a lot. And it really helped me develop my communication because, it is easier to communicate to people about something that scares them and gets them motivated to take action. It's much more difficult to communicate in a sense around something that has no necessarily negative driver, that is simply a step people are doing because it's good for them. And as you've seen, if you're in practice or if you're a student, you will see that's a more difficult conversation. It's a more difficult motivator to get people to take action for. So it definitely helped develop my communication skills, and I'm grateful for that. The problem was I went too far into that direction where, I wasn't willing to share the consequences of what that meant, the consequences of, being subluxated, the consequences of structure, the consequences of the neurology and problems with those things. It was really about, getting somebody checked and getting them at that time, I would say, adjusted, just so they could reap the benefit, that chiropractic is about, enhancing life, and chiropractic is about, turning on the power, and all these other statements that get propagated as communication. And it was great. I had lots of people who started care, lots of people had amazing experiences. And I think for the large part, a lot of people understood the concept. But what would happen is it's those cases where people wouldn't take action because, sure, they understood that there was something of value for them and of benefit. But I think, and this is really the point, I think if you get this is going to open up a whole Pandora's box and hopefully start to change and modify the way you communicate. People understand that being subluxation free, and the way we explain it, as probably you do, people understand that it's good for them. They understand that they're better off not subluxated, and that's great. But here's what they don't understand. They don't understand that being subluxated also has negative effects. It's kind of like exercise. People understand that exercise is good for them, but they don't understand fully, because if they did, they would take different actions. They don't understand fully that not exercising and choosing not to exercise has along with it a negative consequence. Eating a good diet, following Eat by Design principles, very good for you. But if I decide not to do that, or I'm going to take a break, which we'll come back to, which is a really interesting statement that people make sometimes. I'm going to take a break. You can tell I'm laughing and having a chuckle here. I'm going to take a break from bathing. I'm going to take a break from brushing my teeth. I might take a break from sleeping. I think I'm going to take a break from, getting haircuts. I'm going to take a break from shaving. I'm going to take a break from cutting my grass. I'm going to take a break from, all these things that require ongoing either care or at least ongoing action in order to achieve a result. And people don't grasp that concept, because if they did, I think more and more people would choose to take the action steps that you would choose to take, not just because it's good for you, but the reason it's good for you is because the opposite, or not doing something, is also bad for you and has a consequence. And I believe it was Ayn Rand who said something along the lines, and I know I've used this quote in other forums elsewhere, but you can avoid reality, but you cannot avoid the consequences of reality. So when somebody makes a choice, that choice is either to do something, or that choice is also to not do something, and they're not absolved of the consequences. And I think that's a concept that we need to talk about more for people in our practices. So it leads us to, what type of conversations do we have? What are we able to have, I think, in an authentic format where people can understand it, but they're not walking away terrified and scared. And I'm not to say that people don't cry in our practice. It's not something I'm trying to elicit as a manipulative technique. And it's not something I'm looking for as a checkbox or a check mark, but it does happen from time to time, as it does, I'm sure, in your practices at different varying points along the way. But, people come to you sometimes in a really terrible place in their life, whether it be something with their physical health, mental, emotional health, their stress levels. And when you're allowing them to communicate and allow them to be vulnerable, people do cry. That happens. And of course, the flip side is when you paint a picture of hope for somebody, when you show them reality, sometimes people are going to cry. And that's fine, because that's an authentic form of communication. And what we use at Life by Design Elite, or in any of the Life by Design programs, I talk a lot about authentic concern, because I don't think you want no concern. That's where I lived my life for a very long time in practice. And at the same time, I don't want to be generating a manipulative form of concern in order to yield the response. So I think authentic concern communicates, what it is that we're trying to have this person walk away with in terms of an experience and a feeling. And how do you understand this? So I'll tell you exactly. This might be, one of the best tips and strategies I'll ever give on the podcast. And it's something that really made a difference for me, because I know for me, this was a problem. It was something I really struggled with. And for the longest time, it wasn't even really a sense of awareness. It was just, I just didn't know. These people didn't understand. And of course, that's why they weren't deciding to choose care or to move forward. But I started to realize that I needed to have these conversations, but I was still uncomfortable. I'd still been programmed to think that that was wrong, and I didn't want to fall on the other side where I knew that didn't seem right to me. It seemed out of integrity. So I started to backtrack, and interestingly enough, part of the way Life by Design as a template got developed was asking myself about, what are the requirements for fuel, or what are the requirements for movement? And that's what led me to thinking in terms of the requirements for brain and nervous system function, and seeing chiropractic as a strategy more than anything else. So chiropractic in our model being a strategy to maximize the function of the spine and nervous system and correct problems with the spine and nervous system, specifically, AKA subluxations. And so I started thinking in the same terms, what could I say to somebody? Because I felt very confident in nutrition. I felt very confident in fitness, as I'm sure a lot of people listening in do, and probably more confident in that than you do in chiropractic and your knowledge about the spine and nervous system, which leads me to remind you the way this conversation gets easier is developing your certainty. And certainty comes through confidence, and certainty comes through developing knowledge. And so there's a lot of great resources out there, tons that we endorse that, again, you can post in on the Facebook page, or if you're an Elite Doc or in our new Light program, then you can ask the questions there, and I'm happy to tell you more about different resources. But your certainty levels around chiropractic, around spine and nervous system, for the most part, are generally lower probably than they are around fitness and nutrition. And it simply comes down to your knowledge base. And, your knowledge base about fitness is if you move, specifically, if you move your body in a way that, is relatively vigorous, has some strength training components in it, addresses mobility and some of the other factors, that person's probably going to live longer. And statistically, that is what the research shows. So we know that, and we can feel confident saying that. And that confidence means I can sit across from somebody, and when I say, look, we need to start with 3 to 4 training sessions a week. We need to do that for 6 months. And then we can retest you and remeasure you. And I'm confident in saying, here's the results you're going to get. And if you choose not to do it, there's going to also be a negative consequence. I feel confident in saying that that person's going to have an an enhanced risk of cardiovascular disease, cancer, lifestyle-related illnesses, diabetes, inflammatory changes, as well as weight gain and some of the other blood sugar effects. I mean, you can go down the list. We know that. And to be able to sit across from somebody and help them understand that's a consequence, and I'm not trying to make them scared, I'm not trying to make them cry, I'm just simply telling them the truth, I realize that that's the same level of communication that I should have about the spine and nervous system. So I shouldn't be trying to scare people, but at the same time, I shouldn't be sugarcoating it and making it seem as if it's no big deal, because it is a big deal. And if you don't see that it is a big deal, then one, you either got to put more time and energy into developing your certainty and develop confidence and build your knowledge base, or you need to get out because you're in the wrong profession. You should be a nutritionist or a personal trainer if you feel more confident in those areas. But when you start to put yourself in that mindset, it becomes easier to have this conversation with somebody, and you learn the communication frameworks, and you learn how to guide people through this understanding. And there's lots of components and pieces that we build into our systems and procedures that are essentially built on this concept. The end point I want to make is that, yes, on one level, you're doing this because that patient or prospect needs to understand. They cannot make a decision without adequate knowledge. And, in one of the conversations I had earlier, doctors will often feel uncomfortable, quote unquote, selling. They'll be going through, let's say, an end of corrective care, having a conversation about the next phase, and the person said, I wasn't really thinking about moving forward, and it just ends there because they don't want to sell them on the next phase or sell them on chiropractic. And you're not selling them. You are responsible, at least in my eyes, you are responsible as a clinician. This is not about belief systems. This is not about what you feel. You are a clinician. You have a license to communicate to people about the health of their spine and nervous system. You have a level of responsibility. And, you flip the script and you think about, what if you went to a physician who you felt like was an expert in a certain area and you were going for advice and they didn't tell you, they sugarcoated it. And 6 months later you found out, well, if they'd only told you this, then you might have taken a different action step. But maybe they wouldn't have. But at least you've known that that physician told you what needed to be said, and you made the decision, and now you're responsible for the outcomes. The same is true. You don't need a patient coming back to you in 6 months saying, my health has totally declined. I didn't realize that when I stopped coming in for checkups that I was going to lose all the results. And we think, we didn't want to make them feel uncomfortable. We didn't want to sell a chiropractic. In the end, we did them a massive disservice. Those are the types of things that create a negative effect on your brand. Those are the things that people talk about on social media. They're not going to have a hard time if you're telling them the truth or just giving them the reality and then allowing them comfortably to make a decision. So there's no coercion. We're not trying to manipulate them. We're simply telling them what the effects are in both directions. And so if I was having this conversation with somebody, I would simply go through the process. And so we call this in the sales playbook, our reverse authority play. I'll say, based on your schedule over the last 6 weeks, how many times a week have you been getting checked? And they'll say, well, twice. Great. And how many times have I never had to correct you? That's the line. That's the question right there. And they say, well, never. So they're going to at least understand that there's times where they come and potentially wouldn't need an adjustment or a correction. That might be the first time, unfortunately, they're thinking of that, but at least it gets them thinking of the sense that they're coming for a checkup, they're getting a correction. So I'll teach them more about the next phase of care, and then I'll just ask them. So based on that, what do you think? If you were the doctor, what do you think would be the ideal frequency in this next phase of care? Forget about the fact that this is an amazing question and an amazing strategy to help people understand and make their own choice and feel confident in their choice. But let's say in that instance, they think, well, I wasn't really thinking about moving forward. Okay, great. A lot of people end the conversation there and they move on. Instead, what if we said, great, totally understand that, and that is, completely okay. We can close your case today. That won't be a problem. I just want to make sure you understand both the outcomes if we do decide to move forward and the consequences if we don't. So how many times a week have I been checking? We go through the conversation again. I get them to understand that in an ideal world, they would probably change their frequency to XYZ. So they understand that there's still a required checkup and correction if they do want to reach any type of level of function or optimization. And then they understand there's a consequence that, great, should we choose not to check you, which is your choice, you will go back to being subluxated over a period of time and you will lose the results that you've gained. And it can look like this. And here can be some of the effects that we know scientifically with certainty to tell somebody what would be the outcomes. And then I can stop talking and I can confirm. So would you like to close your case, or would you like to move into the rebuilding phase or the optimization phase or whatever stage you are in your, what we call your lifetime care map? Again, I'm having the conversation with them. I'm bringing them in to a level of understanding. So when they make a choice, they're doing it and they can feel confident in it. The flip side of this, and I'll leave you guys with this, it's for you. You need to sleep at night. And for many years, I didn't sleep at night, not well, because I wasn't telling people the reality of their cases. And I made it all about me in terms of how I was feeling, and I didn't want to make them feel scared and upset, and I didn't want them to be concerned. But the truth is they should have been concerned, because either subluxation is a real thing, having real effects on the spine, structure, nervous system, and tissues, or it's not. And if it's not, then what are you doing anyway? Why are you in chiropractic? Why are you communicating this to people? So that brings up a whole other level of question for you and what you're doing and your purpose and your vision. But if you fully believe and are fully sold on what you do, and you're fully sold on the effects of the spine, the nervous system, on stress, the reality of subluxation and what that means and why we get checked and why we need to get checked and what the outcomes are, both good, and then the consequence of not, then you owe it to yourself to have these conversations with people, no matter how hard they are. This is your responsibility as a clinician, as a doctor, and just for your own integrity. So you can sleep at night knowing that you've told this person what needs to be said. And my mantra in these to help you, because again, there's so much attachment, I think, that comes along with these conversations. And I've had that attachment myself for so long, and I'm sure part of it still exists. My personal mantra and my reminder to myself is my responsibility is to this patient as their clinician to communicate what's happening. And it's to myself just authentically to tell them what I see so I can sleep at night. I don't need their $55, right? My life is fine. I'll be okay if they don't continue. Somebody else is going to show up. We're going to help them. They're going to make a financial exchange. Life is good. And that's tougher for sure when you're new, and that's more difficult when you don't have visits. It's difficult when you're standing around twiddling your thumbs, but it doesn't change the fact that that's what needs to be done. And so let's not wait until we don't need their $55. Let's not wait until that time when, well, now I can have this conversation because there's no stress or strain on my practice. Those conversations need to happen now. And if you want to grow your practice and have an impact in your practice and in the people in your community, then the fastest, quickest way to do it is start being authentic with people and start training on how to have these conversations. So, hope, guys, that gives you lots of new things coming up at Life by Design for chiropractors. If we haven't already, check out the new Life by Design Lite group. That's a great way to get into Life by Design without being fully on board in the Elite program, which is a much more intensive program. It'll give you a little taste. So take a look for those links and URLs around and opportunities to jump into that group. So if you have any questions, as always, send them to me. It gives me great content to talk about on the podcast. And otherwise, thank you for listening to Life by Design, the voice of reason in chiropractic.